Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jared with Network Center. Thanks for coming out and enjoying this Thursday with us at the Holiday Inn in Fargo. Last presenter before our 4 o'clock is Mark Thune. He is with, correct, Thune?
Northwest Partners.
With Northwest Partners. Go ahead, Mark. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the attendance. I thought I'd start out because insurance isn't always the most fascinating product, but the lead-in from Blue Tech Alpha or Blue Alpha was a good one into the insurance piece that I'm going to present on. But I wanted to give just a little bit of background on myself because I probably do bring a little different flavor to the cyber insurance field than the typical insurance broker. But I had 3 previous experiences that sort of led me to this point. And it started out with a brief introduction to insurance at a carrier level when I first graduated from college. And then I got bumped from that job because the insurance carrier actually went bankrupt. And I got thrown onto the street. And I happened to end up on the doorstep of a company that was a computer integration company, a startup that just happened to get the IBM PC franchise right when I walked in the door. So I got in on the ground floor of what became a tech craze back in the late 80s, and we installed, we think, the first local area network in Minnesota, and shortly thereafter we were on a project that I was very involved in where we actually installed what we thought, again, was the first data warehouse for Norwest Banks, who's now Wells Fargo. So I've been involved in some very neat tech things, and then after 13 years in tech, and I had a high focus on insurance and banking when I was with the tech company, and that led into a purchase of part of an agency up in Thief River Falls, Minnesota, which my wife thought was crazy that we would ever consider moving up here, but it ended up being quite an opportunity. So I bought half of that. We ended up moving up. I grew that by applying the highest technical focus that we could, and we literally took what took others 10 hours to do, we could do in about an hour by applying all the technology. And then spring forward about 12 more years, and then 4 large agencies in Minnesota, myself and 3 others, ended up forming what is now Northwest Partners, and we have grown that, and I took responsibility for IT from the inception of the company or the merger, and we grew it up to 35 sites in 5 states and 500 plus employees. So I've had a lot of fun in tech on the way. About 3 months ago, I relinquished all my tech duties to a full-time CIO that we hired from United Healthcare. So now I'm just talking insurance and tech, and hopefully I can bring a little insight to you as to what craziness is out there right now. Need the clicker. So I don't need to make anybody more aware, but I mean, this is exactly what's caused these insurance carriers to go ballistic and quite frankly, in some cases, ask for things that aren't even quite possible. And what makes it even worse for customers is that they're oversimplifying the question so the customer doesn't feel comfortable even answering them with a simple yes, no, because they know there's a if question that has to be thrown in there. So what sets this up here, and what is the market like? Cyber demand is up, capacity is down, carriers are exiting the marketplace at a feverish pace. Claims are up, loss ratios are over 70%, we think, this year. Keep in mind, insurance companies make money at about 53 to 55. So insurance companies are not going to continue to lose money. And they're going to react with some crazy stuff in some cases. We've got deductibles going up. We've got extra requirements being added with these applications, with demanding cloud-based backups, and all the things that teams that have come in front of me in some of these presentations have already spoken to. In reality, and there are things that we can do to temper this down, but claim-free accounts are likely this year to see 20 to 30%. Now, they mentioned the presentation in front of me said that an account was happy with a 300% increase. I don't have any customers in my book of business that would be happy with that, but I did have a customer last week that had 2 claims in the last 3 years receive 125% increase, and they actually were very happy to get that renewal. It was a switch in carrier, but we had done the things that I'm going to talk about in the future that made it look better. Because realistically, our job is to market that risk in the best possible light. So if we're setting the stage as far as what the insurance companies see and where their mindset's coming from is 2018 life was good. Ransomware in 2019 went up on the rise, up 131%. Claim frequency was up 33%. And then in 2020, it really went crazy with loss ratios eclipsing 73%. Frequency and severity was up a lot. Ransomware at that point was up 400%, and phishing was up 350. 2021 has really brought what we see as what we would call a hard market or a very tough market. So placement of the coverage. So it's very hard to underwrite accounts for these insurance companies because they haven't asked the sophisticated questions in the past to really learn more about the customers. It's more been a very simple application. Customers were able to answer it sort of haphazardly and still get coverage. Well, those cases are no longer out there. Everybody's going to ask us an extreme amount of questions, and they're even doing some things that I do question that they can do, but they're behind us. They're paying third parties to actually go and scan networks before they'll quote and before they'll write. Is it right? I don't know. I think there's going to be some cases that we might see where that's going to be questioned, and we're going to have to see where it goes. But most importantly, a fully completed application has to be done. If anybody's going to get anything done as far as a competitive cyber quote with a frontline company that's going to have top-level insuring agreements, we have to complete that application as best we can. Now, I personally and the brokers that work for me are going to sit down with the account, and they're going to try to understand what the application says, and then they're going to try to develop a narrative of what that network looks like, what they're doing right, and they're going to build up a case that'll have some of the things that I'm going to bring up on some other slides. Every carrier now that we're aware of is demanding MFA or multi-factor authentication. And they're really getting excited about it when the person has administrative rights. They're looking at encrypting all sensitive data with segregated backups, off-site backups, and in cloud backups. And underwriters are asking an extreme high amount of questions if the customer ever had SolarWinds or if they have it currently. Because 2 of the biggest claims that occurred this year occurred because of that software. And then the use of next-generation antivirus software that protects all endpoints is, again, real important. So what helps keep the cost down? Having an event response plan in place. Having a program, it doesn't even have to be that extensive. It can be as simple as having a written plan that's published to the people so they know where to go to. It might be as simple as just contact the insurance company or contact a partner like the one that was in here before, Blue Team Alpha, or network center or whoever is your provider needs to have that button you can push so you can talk to somebody that can help coach you through those initial stages. Providing anti-phishing training to employees, utilizing endpoint detection and response that includes a centralized monitoring. That was talked about in 2 of the previous seminars that I've been in here today. Managing privileged accounts with privileged account management software. Monitoring all administrative access for unusual behaviors. Keeping an updated log of all software and hardware deployed across the organization, with critical importance on offboarding process for employees when they leave the company. Can't tell you how often that we run into problems, especially when they do these scans and we find employees on the rosters that have full access to the network, tools that the rest of the employees have, and they no longer even work for the company. So for us, having records that we can reference, proof that we can show the insurance carrier. These are the processes that the account looks at, and it just makes it more realistic for us to manage the cost of your program. So what are some simple preventive measures? Be proactive, purchase a broad policy, utilize additional loss control mitigation services, and many of them are provided by the cyber policy once you have it. So be proactive. Again, a lot of the same concepts is just have your security plan formalized, have records that we can show and we can justify to the insurance company. Use MFA and everything that you can strategically afford as far as tools go. But a lot of times, most importantly, is just have it documented and have it recorded so that we can reference it. There was some talk in another one where we're looking at outside vendors and what access they have to the system. Have that as well. Be able to tell the broker like myself, who are your outside vendors that have access to your system? I know in my case, because we did an analysis of who it was for Northridge Partners when I was running the IT. And it wasn't that many, but it was our security companies that managed our doors and who came and went out of our facilities. But when you take 35 of them, it's a lot of partners. It's one in every building. Typically, most of the buildings had the HVAC controlled, and we just put records together that showed all of those things. Made a big difference. Purchase a broad insurance policy. All insurance policies on cyber are not even close to created equal. And the main insuring agreements are here. There literally is, in a typical frontline insurance policy, 23 different security insuring agreement policies in it. So things like security and privacy liability, regulatory coverage, because when a state comes in and says that you were breached because you weren't following the regulation that we have for your site in, pick a state, Vermont, and you didn't know what their regulations were, but you still got breached and their state residents were hurt by it, you're not only going to have to untangle the mess that got created by the breach, you're also going to have to pay the regulatory people the fines that they levy against you. First-party breach costs, that's going to be all the work that's done to try to unravel the nightmare, and that could involve a team like Blue Team Alpha or somebody to negotiate and work out how to retrieve your information back. It could be the legal forensics folks that are going to have to figure out whether the data that was breached, you legally need to provide notification, or are you going to get sued for what damages are done to that individual that their file got breached. And then the third part of the forensics work would be a forensic CPA. And anytime you throw, at least it seems to me, you put forensics in front of any of those three titles, it takes the hourly billing rate to about 3 times. I know Blue Team said that once Pete gets involved, you're talking $400 an hour. And the attorneys that I've worked with, when we've unraveled cases, have been even higher than that. And then the social engineering coverage sometimes is a piece of the cyber policy. Other times it's a piece of the crime policy. So it depends, and you need to understand when your broker's talking to you, what part of it is it with? Because you may have an aggregate limit on top of all of it, or it could be separate if it's on a separate insuring agreement. And then ransomware and extortion coverage, data restoration coverage to bring all your data back, reputational harm coverage if you need to hire a PR, and maybe the biggest one of all, at least in the claims that I've been involved in where they've been big dollars, it's when we start affecting the income side for the customer. So they're down for 23 days and they can't produce turkeys down an assembly line because all the machines are tied up. Extreme high cost in that. And all those are separate insuring agreements. And then the third part, the simple preventive measures, are just utilize the things that either the broker and or the carrier are going to give to you, typically, for nothing. So in one case that I reference, Travelers Insurance Company, for one, will give you X amount of hours of upfront consulting to help you out, to make sure that their risk is just as sound as it can be, set you up for a goal process of what to work on during the year that you can get done before your next renewal so it can be more competitive. They may do network vulnerability scans on your network. They may give you that data, or if they don't do it, maybe it's worth it to pay somebody to come in and do it. And then ongoing updates on vulnerabilities and patches specific to you. Highly encouraged to take full advantage of running all those updates on a regular basis in a very organized manner. I know in our company we run them immediately on some and at a very bare minimum once a week. Social engineering training, exercises to prepare for a breach event with your IT folks. Utilize breach coaches. Like I said, Travelers offers it for free. I know other carriers do the same. Information security hotlines, training videos. We've actually started a service last year where we take and offer a suite of videos that our customers can go in and click on the ones that they want and set up a campaign to push out to cell phones or computers to all the users on the network. So literally they just set up a campaign. It pushes them out for a year. Each employee gets an email with that on it. It's got about usually 6 to 8 minutes of instructional, 10 questions. They answer it, and that's our log. Then we can show that to the insurance company and go from there. The more training, the better, because those are your single point of failure. Sort of pulling it all together, the liability side is the third party side of it. So that's the privacy and security, the management of the media, meaning websites typically, and the regulatory. The first party are the bottom 2 boxes. The breach response, so that's your network and all the services and all the insuring agreements that go with that. And then the loss of income, including direct income loss after a cyber event for the customer, but also most of the frontline policies will have a dependent business income component to them on a separate insuring agreement, so that if one of your business partners, say you're in a business that requires boxes to be used and your box vendor can't provide those boxes, so you can't ship product for a week because you're out of boxes until they get back up and running from their cyber event, there's a component for that will pay, even if it's not your issue. And then the cybercrime. And I think there's been a lot of talk around the different transfers of money. Most related, most prevalent claim nowadays are the social engineering claims. So what kind of coverage do I need? Going back to those boxes, I think these are the most important ones. The first-party losses are the losses of your data, the notification that may go along with the loss of the data. So if you lose all your employee files to a bad actor, we're going to have to notify them, and we're going to have to provide 2 years of credit monitoring by law, at least in Minnesota. Every state's a little different. Forensics costs, we talked about that. Negative publicity costs, business income, cyber extortion and theft of funds via social engineering. Those would be indirect or direct losses to the company. And then the third-party losses are on the right side. The invasion of privacy, and the other third-party loss would be a loss related to a payment card where you're going to be fined by another regulatory agency. We talked about the crime. And then the other considerations. I just want to bring this up because a lot of folks won't talk about some of these things that are very important. The insuring agreements that are out there today, there still are some that don't include employee-owned devices. So when you've got that modified worker and they're going home and they're using their own computer to come in to the system, you better have an insuring agreement that includes that, because as soon as they log in and they don't do something right and they get hacked and it's your information that gets breached, now you have no coverage if those devices are not included. So it's something that's got to be looked at. And then the other one is money should also include virtual currency. So just make sure that's in the policy. Talk about these last two, the additional insured and the subrogation clauses, because it's very common to have agreements, contracts between your company and other vendors. And if they're written well with good risk transfer, which everybody's hypersensitive to right now, they probably have clauses in them that says, I'm naming you additional insured and you're naming me additional insured if I'm responsible for something that I do with you, my customer, or you, my vendor. And then it also might have a waiver of subrogation, meaning I waive the right to subrogate against you. So if that partner of yours gets breached, and just say it's an HVAC vendor, and now you've waived subrogation against them, they get breached, somehow it's the control that's sitting in your building, and they get into your data somehow because of them, and you've waived subrogation, you just gave all your rights away. You can't go after them. So my point there is bring in a broker like us to read your contracts to make sure you're not giving away all of that liability to somebody else. So I did put together some claim examples. If anybody has any interest in any one specifically, I'm just going to highlight a couple and we can always come back to these. But I'll highlight the betterment one. It's an uncommon thing found in the better policies have it, but I would say probably only 10 to 15% of the policies that we review has that component. And we see it almost needed to be used in every case where we end up with a decent-sized breach. And what it says is it's going to give a sub-limit of insurance to the customer for bringing their hardware and their software up to date after a breach. So, like Pete in the previous presentation mentioned, high amount of customers that get breached for ransomware get hit for ransomware again within the next 30 to 60 days. What we want to do is apply whatever we have to that customer's site once we get them back up in betterment. So if your network company that unravels the mess says we need to really look at putting these 2 layers of additional software in and put in another server to run them, the policy will actually pay to put that in. Extortion data, I'm going to leave those. Computer fraud, social engineering, I think we've heard enough examples of that today. I'll just reference one claim that I just had resolved here on Monday, where in June, one of my contractors, I'm going to just say a small contractor because they only have about 8 employees, dirt contractor, their email was hacked, and the bad actor ended up getting in on the billing, emails going back and forth between the general contractor and them who were the sub, and they intercepted them. The bad actor got the general to pay their bank account instead of my contractor, and literally within 30 days they were talking about filing for bankruptcy, even though they knew they would probably get it back because it really wasn't their fault. But we only had a $100,000 cyber policy, and that was not enough. So we helped them to the point of actually getting the full reimbursement that actually just showed up finally in their bank account. And luckily for them, their bank increased their line of credit, so they stayed going, but literally it virtually bankrupted them within 30 days. Talked about business income. I have had a claim on this, telecom fraud. It's sort of a throw-in, but where a bad actor will come in and run up a whole bunch of phone bills. And there are limits for that are typically included in the aggregate. Doesn't happen often, but it can. We talked about dependent business income. So what happens if you're hit with ransomware? What's the process to engage the insurance carrier? Naturally, my first response would be call us or call the cyber insurance company vendor if you have the policy. The cyber team on the carrier end will jump in as fast as possible. I'm going to qualify it and say it's even better to have a partner like Network Center or Blue Team or even a legal partner identified in your disaster recovery plan, because sometimes it's better to have them, your partner who knows your network all that much better than an outsider that might come in, apply what they can to assist to get it shut down, but literally they're going to do things like disconnect your computer from the network, notify your entire IT security team, change the logon credentials, take a picture of the ransomware note so that you can have a responder actually start working on it immediately, and it can be used as evidence. And then I'm referencing another insurance company here that offers a tremendous amount of of breach services. And there's a link actually in this PowerPoint that you can go to take a look at it. There is also some guidelines on ransomware payments, and there was a discussion before this presentation about that, where you can't just err on the side of automatically paying the ransomware because you actually could be breaking some laws. So a breach response may include all of the things that I've talked about. I'm just going to highlight them here. The forensics piece, again, the network piece, the CPAs, the attorneys, the notifications that might have to go out that the attorney will tell you you need to do or you don't need to do, depending on what got breached, via the legal assistance. Are we going to need to hire a public relations firm? Are we going to need to apply credit monitoring and organize all of that? And then what regulatory concerns do we have? The insurance company is going to guide you through that. So first, what you're going to do is hopefully let us know as your broker and or your carrier. We'll answer any questions. We typically are going to try to respond within an hour and get you working on correcting the situation. We'll assign a breach coach for immediate assistance. So they're your go-to person that's going to interface with the next step, which will be the team. The breach coach will be on the team, all the forensics people, the vendors that are involved. And then that breach coach will also be your consistent communication vehicle. So they'll talk to you. They're going to try to ask you, how involved do you want to be? Do you want to be involved from a leadership perspective, or you just want to be on the sidelines? And then we'll guide it depending on what involvement you'd want. And then hopefully by the end, we've resolved the incident. And that's where I'll take any questions.
I do have one. You mentioned hiring somebody that manages their systems to help you out when you have that incident or start to look at it. However, what I'm seeing is they're inside the policies themselves saying you must contact us first, but in addition to that, you're also saying you must use our pre-approved vendor list to respond.
I'm glad you asked that question because I was going to address that, and I didn't on one of the previous slides. All carriers, as I did mention, are different. So what we really like to look at with our go-to carriers, and we, at least at North Risk Partners, we have a top 12, let's call, and our top 5 are all going to have the same philosophy on that fact, and that is they will allow you, and it's within the insuring agreement language, that you can use your own partners. You can decide who you want to work with, because there are companies that are going to drive you to the one that they have partnered with. What we attempt to do, if just ABC company uses this law firm and they use this internet forensics company and they use this partner as a CPA, we'll present that to the insurance carrier and say, this is who they work with. Can you, if you don't approve them now, can you look at approving them for them after we write the policy? So that is a really good point. It's a negotiable point because naturally the insurance company is going to have their go-to, list of partners, but you can add to that list of partners. Some carriers won't allow it at all, but others will.
What about the difference between, we had this happen when we were working with a client. They had a claim, they had insurance on both ends, okay? So they made a payment to a bank that they shouldn't have, thought they were paying the real vendor.
Yep.
Turns out they were not. So this is $125,000 to get, is what it was. So in turn, they said, okay, we're going to file a claim. Their insurance company said, no, we're not paying. The place they were doing business with, their cyber insurance company said, we're not paying because it was a criminal So in turn, they had to tie some cyber insurance to criminal policies and put them together. Have you seen anything like that?
I have not, but what?
Because cyber crime, right? But that was a new one.
So that almost makes me think that that carrier did not have a strong crime component within the cyber policy, and they might have, they probably should have had it there if they could, but some companies don't, some carriers don't. So then it's our job as a broker to explain that to the customer and say, we need to get that from a crime insurance policy versus the cyber policy.
That's what happened here. So
Yeah.
it's the first time I'd seen that.
Yep, and that's why I brought that up earlier, that make sure what those insuring agreements are within that policy. I mean, you're paying a lot of money for those policies, so knowing what all those agreements are beneficial. And we all know insurance policies are about as interesting as, it's nothing you really want to read. But it's our responsibility as a broker to bring them to you and explain them in layman terms. And the unfortunate part about that I see, especially having IT and then risk management involvement, is that I'm usually negotiating and talking with the CFO or the owner of the company. But rarely am I explaining those insuring agreements to the IT people and the people that actually do the work on the equipment. So one of the things that I've tried to do over the past few years is let's involve the people. I mean, they need to know how this policy works. Not only do they have vested interest. I mean, this company is their partner, really, because that's typically the thing that keeps these folks up at night, as you probably know, John.
One last question for me, if I so could ask, is individuals suing businesses over privacy rights. You got the California law, which is now changed to CCRP, which is coming, which is going to give me explicit rights as an individual in California to now sue. How do we handle that as a business? Because now if you have individuals coming back, you can about imagine all of us in here have customer data. That's another ballgame when it starts getting to an individual person.
Yeah.
Even class action.
That's where we really need to have.
Mark may want to repeat that question.
Oh, okay. The question was with the personal information loss. There's laws in certain states that are going to give a lot more rights to the employee to sue the employer if those are breached, if their file is breached, and they can sue the employer. So make sure that privacy, this component right here, that's within the policy and that the language reads correctly so the employee is included as an insured. Sir.
Have you run into any issues in North Dakota where the Attorney General's office identified the loss prevention services as rebating?
Haven't? Nope. And we do a fair amount of value-added services in that regard. But it's never been questioned. It's a good question, though. Will it ever? Might be. Don't know.
They changed the law at the last legislative session, so.
Yeah, maybe it'll get some more attention. The question is really driven towards some of these value-added services that we're giving to customers to make them better. Could that be viewed as what is illegal in the insurance industry as rebating? So giving away things so that the customer will write the insurance with you, but I'm not aware of it yet. Not saying it might not come, but for right now, the insurance commerce departments have been very friendly to businesses like us providing value-added services that help customers.
Multi-factor, so I'm dealing with that right now, and So in order, and I'm in a very small time frame here to get this renewed. Multi-factor is, are you saying where it's required for external, maybe on appliances, firewalls, things like that? Or are you talking everything, we have 800 employees, everything internal also?
Yes, that's what some of them are demanding. And that's why I referenced, I mean, literally one carrier gives four questions, and I wish I could repeat them exactly.
Well, I like
It's
how
yes or no.
They're at the minimum, so they put it in there. It's just that the window is so small.
It scares me, and I mean, in some cases where I'm the broker, and some of the companies are saying yes, 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 and I'm saying to myself, I don't know if they can really say yes, yes, yes. But then I get the other side of it where the IT guy or gal gets a hold of it, and they're like, no, 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 because it's not every time. So I don't know. There's no perfect answer. I just know it's very helpful for me to be able to have the background and then talk to the underwriters and articulate a little more clearly than the average person qualifiers. And they will listen. That's the thing. Underwriting is subjective.
The last session, he said that anything external was required, and then admin accounts and all that stuff. He said end users, not so much.
Okay, see, yeah.
But at some point they were.
Well, when you're looking at, I think we just got this week, and I have December 1st, January renews, that's a big.
Oh, yeah.
Do an entire organization. Now, external, that's not such a big.
Some are both.
We're seeing or MFA on everything, is what we're seeing with the insurance providers now.
Yeah, so good with that for next. Go around.
Yeah.
Give us another year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it came up fast.
Well, that's our time. Thank you all for attending. Hopefully you got something out of it.
Are you seeing any EDR requirements, XDR requirements, endpoint